This is FD Talks, a brand new podcast series by Funeral Directors Live, where we explore ideas, insights, and solutions for serving families in a rapidly changing marketplace. Well, hello and welcome once again to another episode of FD Talks. I have today in the studio with me Josh McQueen, who is Vice President of Product for Passare. And Josh, well, I'd like to welcome you in today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Can you talk to me a little bit about what Pisarry is?
Pisarry is at its core case management software, but it really does a lot more than that. So what we're trying to do is help funeral homes streamline their processes, become more efficient, so ultimately you can spend more time serving your families. We do that in a lot of variety of ways. That we've got more integrations with more companies than anyone else out there. We have our family planning center that allows funeral homes to work directly with families and maybe communicate with them in the way that they prefer, the family prefers. And that's just scratching the surface.
What problem or what problems in the funeral industry did you identify that needed to be solved when Passare started making progress as a company?
Yes, well, the big initial problem was that Passare was founded from a national study. Nearly about 10 years ago, the study was conducted, and out of that was that the big finding from that was that 63% of families were dissatisfied with the way funeral homes interact and communicate with them. And the big gap there was technology. And so I mentioned our family planning center, but that was a big aspect of it, in building this hub for funeral homes to interact with and really streamline those processes where you're spending less time on the more transactional items of filling out paperwork and asking for mom's maiden name and social security number and things like that, and more time around the actual memorial and celebration of the service.
What observations have you made, I don't know, just over in the past 10 years as far as technology in this field? What kind of progress have you seen?
The technology itself, we're seeing, more and more companies, ourselves included, that are trying to continue to push things forward. From an strictly industry perspective, it's been interesting. We're seeing a lot of consolidation. And so we're seeing companies get bought up, a lot of our competition being bought up. And so in those companies, we've often seen some consolidation of technology together, website companies and case management systems coming together, which had already been out there. And it feels a little bit like pushing pier and beam houses together to make a mansion. Structurally, it may not all be that sound, but in that, we're seeing quality of support go down. We're seeing, things being taken offshore, and so support being in the Philippines now. That's a big one that we're hearing a lot. And so we're really trying to make sure that we continue to be for the funeral director, by the funeral director, and that we're putting funeral service first, and that it doesn't all come down to the bottom line.
I know I just recently attended NFDA, and as did you, and you don't have to walk very far before you see a technology-based company with a booth there. That was a pretty interesting observation for me to make. So, Josh, tell me a little bit about what are some new things that you're working on, or some things that you guys might be improving.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of things in the work. So it's a big one's e-commerce. So we have working with Funeral Directors Life on arrangement guide. So we have the pre-need side of that done, and we're one of the only companies out there that allows for a pre-need contract to actually be finalized and a consumer to go through that entirely on their own. So, but we're currently working on the at-need side of that and bringing in the at-need tools, and so kind of the full picture altogether. E-signature is another big one. So getting to where a funeral home can populate and send for signature literally any one of their documents, and have that all done within our planning center. There's obviously online payments, and so accepting credit cards wherever you want. Our mobile application. We got a lot of irons in the fire right now.
I may be off base here, but it just seems like to really succeed today using technology, you're not really just out there competing against everyone. There's a lot of integrations involved, and there's lots of ways that you have to determine how you can make things work with other things.
Yeah, so much of the value of our system is, its core is essentially a digital filing cabinet, but we're trying to be a lot more than that. And so being the central hub of a funeral home's operations, we try to make it as easy to send and share data wherever you need it to go. So one of the ways we've really tried to do that is through our public API. So you mentioned all of the companies that are at NFDA, the technology companies. Well, a lot of them come up to us and want to integrate with us, which is fantastic. But instead of prioritizing that into our roadmap and, prioritizing it over e-signatures or something else, we've made it as easy as we possibly can for other companies to tie into us. And we literally hand them this API documentation and say, let us know when you're ready. We'd love to connect. So, it's a big piece of what we do in trying to streamline those operations and really allow a funeral home to pick and choose who they want to work with while still keeping all their data in one place.
Now, speaking of integrations, you guys were recently kind of acknowledged in a very public way for an integration that you guys had worked on. You want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we were fortunate enough to win the Innovation Award this year at NFDA. And that award was for our integration with Pennsylvania's health department. So the reason that's novel, as most funeral directors would know, is before this integration, there was never a third-party platform like Passare that had been able to connect and tie into a health department's death certificate system. And so with our integration with Pennsylvania, a funeral home can keep all their data in Pisarry, like we were just talking about, and literally click a button and file a death certificate in the state of Pennsylvania. So the innovation within that is the precedent it sets for kind of a case study for other states and saying, here's what this can look like. Here's how we're doing it securely, keeping all the information where it needs to be. And here's how we can replicate that.
And that wasn't something that you guys just had a couple of programmers work on for a few weeks and it was done, was it?
No, there were actually really two iterations of this that took really about 3 years. So we started this in 2018 and had it done, and if not towards the beginning of 2019. And then there were some setbacks with the health department. They had to go back and rework some things on their end. And we came back in 2020. So kind of before COVID hit, started working on it all through COVID and got it done towards the end of last year.
Now, I also know that just these types of things don't happen very easily, and I know that you've probably gotten some requests on how do we get this started in other states and things like that. Tell me a little bit about some of the back end cooperation that you guys were having to get for that.
So like I mentioned, this is one of the biggest feature requests that we get, and our answer before was always, we're happy to have a conversation, but there's nothing we can do right now. Our hands are tied. No health department has opened up their vital record system for us to connect to. So I don't think it's an exaggeration to say we talked to a dozen different states, and they all had feigned some interest, but we needed them to build the APIs on their end for us to connect to. And it just never happened. And so the biggest difference in Pennsylvania was getting the Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association involved in the process. So they were able to use some of their lobbying power, if you will, and help push the health department and say this is something that would be hugely important and helpful for our members, for our funeral home members, and we'd love to see you make this happen. And the health department eventually did, which was fantastic.
So, Josh, getting back to the topic of just technology in general, why is it so important for the funeral industry to really step up and adopt technologies like Pisarry and some of these other integrations that really can help save them time?
Yeah. So we've actually been playing with a new idea, this concept of, we're just talking about the Innovation Award, but the innovative funeral home. And what does that actually mean? And we've begun identifying this idea of, we know that there's these funeral homes that we say they are innovative funeral homes, but within that we also see these funeral homes that are maybe idle, like a car is idle. The idle funeral home more has a if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. And it's, there may not be a problem today, but we know it could be better, but we're not going to focus on that right now. So the innovative funeral home really looks at this idea of we know it can be better and we want to keep trying to become better. And so technology is a aspect and a component of that, but it's not the entirety of it. So there's this concept known as Levitt's diamond model. And in that, it talks through this idea of a diamond, and each corner is people, process, structure, and technology. And the understanding that as you tweak one, it's going to affect the other three. And so really what innovative funerals do in regards to technology is they're looking at what's the best way that we can serve our funeral consumers and how can we use technology to improve that service. But then they're also looking at it in relationship to their processes, to their people, and to their structure, and saying that if we implement this new technology, how do we need to adapt those other three areas to make sure that we are continuing to push the whole business forward and ultimately serve these families as best as we can. We're somewhat, as Seth Godin would say, trying to create this tribe of innovative funeral homes, or those that aspire to be an innovative funeral home.
I think those are the ones that are going to most correctly align with success anyway.
Right.
I'm sure that you've identified over the years some sort of a process or a way that these things happen where suddenly you see that light bulb go on and the funeral director goes, or the funeral home owner goes, hey, I need to do something. At what point do they engage a technology company, and what does that process look like?
Yeah, normally there's a trigger event. It's something has gone wrong. So, in the past year it's been COVID. That I remember 5-6 years ago when we were first getting going with Pisarry, and we were showing people our planning center, and literally getting kicked out of funeral homes and being told, you're trying to take the funeral director out of this out of the equation. You just want the family to do it all themselves, or what are they paying me for if they're filling out all the paperwork? And the light bulb, when COVID hit, was like, oh, okay. We do have to have technology options to communicate. And so often in Passare specifically, the light bulb is realizing that it's not about forcing people to use technology a specific way, but about giving them the options to communicate the way they prefer. So it's often we don't realize that there's these, we call them clicking collars from this study that I mentioned earlier, but these segments of consumers that prefer technology, that you're actually forcing them to interact with you in person and to sit down and get, have them watch you fill out paperwork when they would actually prefer to just provide that all to you the night before. So it's it's a lot of different things. For others, on the case management end of it, it's your computer crashes and you lose all your data, and all of a sudden you realize you need a cloud-based solution, something that's on newer technology. It's realizing that you could become a lot more efficient with integrations and things like that you're not necessarily getting in your current platform. And so there's a variety of trigger events that can occur whenever that light bulb goes off.
And you were just talking about, that disintermediation of the funeral director that they were so afraid of when you start incorporating technology. What has been the reality? Has there been disintermediation? Because in my experience, in the funeral homes that I've been in, people are glad to be back in funerals. They're glad to be back in the funeral home, and they're glad to be, being able to spend that face-to-face time. But it's more of I would say like a blended experience. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So that blended experience has for sure been there, that you'll have people that want to start online and finish in person. On a pre-need standpoint, you have some people that want to start in person, maybe go home and think about it for a little bit and finish online, sign the paperwork and things online. And so I don't think it's an either or. I don't think that the minority has been the people that want to do fully everything online. And you can almost think about purchasing a car or something like that, that how often do we just go online, look at the pictures, and then have a $15,000 transaction that we want to, we're just, put in my credit card info and I'm good. And so more often than not, you're going to start that transaction online, but you want to go and, to the dealer or to the place, give it a test drive, ask questions, things like that. And that's more often what we're seeing. So again, there's the minority within there, but technology is still a component of that. They don't want to walk in and just have salespeople, and not to say that funeral homes do this, but at a car dealership, and I guess that's not maybe the best example, but car dealership where I just want to browse and you got salespeople badgering you the entire time. It's let me do it on my couch. Let me kind of browse and figure out and orient myself on my own first, and then I'll come to you when I'm ready to have a conversation.
So in your experience, what is success starting to look like for the funeral home who does start engaging in more technology and is seeing some growth? Is that happening?
Yeah. So, I mean, success is a relative term. So,
Let's just pretend it's the opposite of failure for the
yeah,
sake of this conversation.
yeah. So, I think, again, success is probably this idea of providing options. And it's at the very beginning of the process as a family hits your website. It's that they're seeing that there's options available and how to communicate. So in this study that we were founded out of, there was kind of a changing of a guard. And so all of this is on our website, by the way. It's Passare.com/NFC as a new funeral consumer. And from that, there's segments that have been identified. And there's this changing of the guard. And essentially, on one half, you have this half that does not prefer technology, which is fine. But there tend to be an older generation. You have a new half that's younger, that's coming into play, that does prefer technology. One of those segments is what we call a dead ender. They're the direct cremation. They don't see any value in a funeral at all. They just want the cheapest, most commoditized option. But if we think about technology, often the companies that are offering the best technology and communication options are the direct cremation crowds, the direct cremation providers. And so as this new wave of funeral consumers is coming in and they are looking and seeking for those technology communication options, they're only finding that in the direct cremation providers. And so these click-in callers, or what we call solo seculars, these other two segments that we actually have data that says they're willing to spend money on a funeral and on a service and everything else. They're going to the direct cremation providers because those are the only ones that are providing them the options to communicate in the way they prefer. So to me, success is about adapting your business to reach this new funeral consumer that's been coming in for the last 10 years and has just escalated even more because of COVID. But providing those options and displaying your business in a way that says that we're friendly and we want to work with you.
Well, Josh, I feel like the key takeaway here is, you talked about those different types of funeral homes, the ones that really want to see success and really want to lift themselves up into an offering that's attractive to today's changing funeral consumer. I think this has been very insightful for us, and I appreciate you coming in today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If you would like to reach out to us about this episode or this series, please visit us online at funeraldirectorslife.com/FD Talks. There you can find information about this episode and submit any comments, suggestions, or feedback about our series. And we also welcome your ideas for future episodes. Join us next time on FD Talks as we explore ideas, insights, and solutions for serving families in a rapidly changing marketplace.